And we're back.
Yes, Road to Code, episode 10.
Oh my gosh, episode 10. Man, I remember episode 1.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like that long ago either.
Wow,
We've just been breezing through them.
that's crazy. How's it coming along with what you're learning?
I feel like I have learned so much since the beginning of this podcast. I did not know anything before, but I still feel like I don't know anything really.
It's funny because I feel the same way. I'm always having to Google everything, It's like, oh man, that's cool. So let's talk a little bit about what we've done and what's led us to this point. Okay. And I don't want to go all the way back to the beginning, but I kind of want to work with what we've done in the databases, right? So we've created a few databases, and I think you're understanding the concept of what a database is and what a database server is. And so, you're actually running a database server on your local machine, right?
Mhm.
And that database server can house multiple databases, right?
Mhm.
And so those databases are using a username and password that is the system administrator. But just imagine running all these different databases under different identities. You can actually segregate them and keep them from accessing each other. So if you create database 1 and you create a user for database 1 and give it its own password and say you can only access this database, it prevents you from using that same user and accessing another database on the same database server. So you can see where security comes in and actually begins to segregate these databases pretty
Mhm.
nicely. So when you're using databases in a hosted environment, let's say, for example, you host a database on GoDaddy, on AWS, on say, for example, Azure, which is Microsoft. This is basically what they have. They have a big monstrous machine with tons of horsepower, and they got a database server, and each database that they create has a username and password that only you know. And you can go and use that database on this monster machine. Sometimes they're free, sometimes they cost a few pennies a month to use them, depending on how big your database grows. But this is how a shared environment would work. You can see that, right?
Yeah.
And so we've built some databases, we've built some tables within that database. So you pretty much, your database is represented by a bucket, and then your tables, are represented as items in that bucket. And then so you also have other things. You've created some stored procedures, right? To be able to execute certain reuse the code to execute the same instruction over and over. And all you do is just change the parameter, and all of a sudden that same stored procedure, that same piece of code, returns a different result every time, just depending on the parameters that you're passing through. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So far, everything that we've done has been contained to that database. We haven't gone outside that database. So a database has to be accessed from an application. And so today, what we're going to work on is a console application that we're going to write some code that will connect to your database, grab the data, and allow us to work with the data. And so, we've done the start procedures for create, for updating, for reading it, and for deleting our data, right? So, if you take the acronym to create, read, update, delete, it spells CRUD, which is a acronym that's known in the industry, but it's not really used. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's like nobody walks around saying, "Hey, go create CRUD for this." It's just like it. We just understand what CRUD is, but we don't really use it in a day-to-day basis because you don't create CRUD every day. There are some instances where CRUD does apply, but it's very few times. And what we may do is we may say something like, yeah, we're going to build this page and it's basically going to be CRUD, you know, which means we're going to create a record, we're going to read a record or read multiple records, we're going to update a record, and we're going to delete a record. And so, you know, we may use that as saying, this is basic CRUD, you know, this is nothing, nothing that's any more complicated than that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do, I wanted to diagram it first to give us a visual. So let me open up my Google Chrome. And I'm going to go to diagrams.net. And I'm going to work with a UML diagram. And I believe that the one I want is, I think it's this one. Let's go ahead and try this one. I do have a folder specifically for roadtocode, so we'll save it in there. And so we'll go ahead and we'll give this one a title, and we'll call it application layers. And so I want to start with a blank slate. So I want to go ahead and just delete this whole thing. And then let's see here. Perfect. We'll do that. Okay. So we've talked about our database, right? Is that too small, or is that?
No, this is a good size. Well, I'll have it full screen on mine, so I can see it.
Okay. So this is our database, right? Let me go ahead and create a big. Nice. Okay. And so the SQL Server, it's represented as a canister, right? And then internally to the canister, I'm sorry, this is actually a SQL database. And so internal to the database, I'm just going to represent this with like a little torn sheet here. And let me see how, oh, it goes into a second page. I don't want that. Let me bring this up a little bit. I enjoy diagramming, by the way.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can increase the font size on this. Yeah, I got to start typing something. So we can store tables. And let's see here. Let's increase the font size now. Nice. And we also created stored procedures, right? So this, you know, our database, so far we've created tables and stored procedures. There's a ton of other things that we can do within a database. In fact, we can also do security and security. And we've seen that with our users, right? So we created a user and a password, and it works with SQL only. So we got that. So the SQL database, you're going to create an application. I'm going to represent your application with this little box here. I should say this big box. And I'm going to go ahead and center it. So this application, I'm going to go ahead and add some text here. We're going to call it console application. And let me increase the size of this here. And I'll make this a bigger font so we can all see it. Perfect. And I'll center this right on there. And then I believe that if I right click on these two, I can group them. So now you see how the text that I added, now it just kind of moves along with, cool. Let me remove that arrow. And I actually want to add a different arrow. It's a one directional arrow. And I'm going to go ahead and hook it up to there. And I'm going to hook it up to here. And then I'm going to drag this puppy and have it like that. So your console application is going to make a call to the database and call one of these stored procedures. We're going to pass in some parameters, right? And we're going to call one of these stored procedures. And then these stored procedures, once they execute, what's going to happen is they're going to return. We're going to call a command. All right. Let me increase the font size on this T-SQL. So we're going to execute some T-SQL from your console application. And what this is going to return is tabular data. Let me increase the font size in here. All right. So your console application executes some T-SQL, means we call a stored procedure. Basically, it's going to be T-SQL, right? Mm-hmm. That's the programming language that we use in order to execute it on the server. It's going to return tabular data. Tabular data, it sounds like a big word, but it just really, it's a table data. So just imagine Excel with rows and columns. That's all basically it's returning. Okay. Does that make sense? You with me on that?
Yeah.
But in order for you to be able to do that from your console application, you're going to need a connection. And then this connection is going to have, and I'm just going to put different shapes just so that we can differentiate them. I think I'll use this one here. The connection itself requires what we call a command object. So if I say, so the connection requires a command, and in this command, we can do a couple of different things. So the command has a couple of different ways of executing. One of them is called a reader. There's another one that is called what they call non-query. And then there's a third type, and I think there's a fourth type, but we don't normally use that. The fourth type is called scalar. So the reader is what actually returns tabular data. Non-query returns the number of rows affected. And the scalar is the first row, the first column of whatever value is in there, that's what it returns. So I'll go ahead and put this here, and I will group it along with this. So we have the connection, which is our little round box represented by a round box. And then we have this, what is it called? This is a hexagon. This hexagon represents our command. And then our command, we can say, hey, execute a reader, which will return tabular data for us. And then we just got to go through the rows and columns and go and pull out the information from those individual rows and columns. Or we can execute non-query, which just says, just tell me how many rows are affected. It gives you a single integer. Mm-hmm. Or we can do a scalar, which gives you the first row, first column, whatever value exists in that first cell. Imagine on Excel sheet, column A1 or cell A1, it gives you that particular value. Whatever's in there, that's what you get. And so each one of these has a specific use. For the most part, we're going to be using reader and non-query. So when you create a record, all you want to do is just insert the record. You're not going to get anything back. So we use it with non-query. When we read a record, we're getting tabular data back that we want to read. So we're going to use the reader command, the command we wanted to execute the reader, and say, give us some tabular data back. When we update, we go back to non-query because we don't care about the results. We just want it to update the record. And the same thing when you're deleting, it's going to be non-query. We don't care about getting results back. Mm-hmm. We just want to go and delete the data and move on with life. Your console application will work with that result, right? just call this a result. And this result will be either a reader or a, an integer, which is what we would get back from the non-query, or some kind of object, and whatever that value is in the first. So in a nutshell, this is from a 10,000 foot level, the application that we're about to build. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And what we're building it for significant, right? Which is birthdays, I think.
Yep.
And we got do we have those stored procedures already, or we're still working on them?
Yeah, we have those.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing. So we can go ahead and share this diagram, and you can put it in the show notes, and people can go and grab it from my Google Drive, and they can make a copy of it for themselves. All right, so let's open up Visual Studio. And I think we have a solution called significant, right? Oh, we don't. Oh, cool. We get to do it from scratch.
All right.
Nice. Okay. So what I want to do, oh man, this is so cool because we get to start it. I think we should put this into GitHub, and we should make it available. I think we did say we were going to make it available, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll make it available, and people can take the code as it evolves and run with it, so that they can go and do their own thing. Excellent. And so now what we want to do is we want to right click on that solution, and we want to add a console application.
Console app.
Yep, that's it. And we're going to call this significant dot console app. We'll be creative. We'll call it console app. Excellent. Go ahead and create that. And then we want to do one more thing. We want to make sure that we're using .NET 5. So right click on the console app and go to properties. And in here, you see how it says target framework 3.1. We want to select 5.0. We want the latest and greatest. You hear me? And so go ahead and save this. You can save it with Control S. And then you can go ahead and close this tab. So what we want to start with is we want to, do we have records in the birthdays table in the significant database?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. Okay. This is great, because what we want to do is we're going to create a flow to this little console application. Okay. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab all the records, and we're going to display them on the screen, so that, and we don't have that many, so we don't have to worry about scrolling past beyond the length of our screen. So we'll make sure to keep it a few. There's ways of doing paging, but I don't want to get into that just yet. I want to be able to do some simple CRUD so that we can display. So what we'll do is when you launch this application, it'll display the records that we have, and then we can go and select a record to edit. And I think there's only a few fields, so we can go and just kind of do some console read to be able to enter the data. And as we grab it, we'll go ahead and we'll perform the update. So we'll take care of our read by just reading the whole thing. We'll do an edit, which is update. And then we need to do the create. And so we need to figure out a way to do the create. And we'll figure that out in a moment. But then we could also do the delete. And so we'll go with that. So let's go ahead in this console right line. Instead of hello world, we'll just call it significant birthdays. All right. And let's go ahead and just save this and then run it. Just so that we kind of start getting the visual of what's going on here, just to make sure that As we're going through it, we're able to see what breaks. Okay, so we got significant birthdays up on top. That's cool. That's what we want. Go ahead and close this window. And so go to the end of the line and start a new line. So we're going to create a method, but we want to let Visual Studio do some of the work for us. So we're going to create a method and we're going to say, we're going to call it list birthdays. So you're going to create, just go ahead and type in list birthdays, Pascal casing, open close parenthesis, and finish it off with a semicolon. Okay, so list birthdays doesn't exist. This is a function that we need to create. Mm-hmm. And right where you're at, you can do control period. And it'll say, do you want to generate this method? And so you say, yes, of course, please be my guest. Generate the method for me.
There it is.
There it is. Oh, that's kind of cool, huh? So remember our diagram?
Which one?
The one I just created.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, you know what? Let me share that. The toggle between the two, right? Mm-hmm. So right now, you've created your console application.
Yep.
Okay. And so in where we're going to list the birthdays, we're going to start creating the connection. We'll start creating the command, and we're going to use tabular data, and we're going to call store procedure in the database. That's going to return the tabular data. And then we're going to use the result, which results in a reader. And we're going to spin through that reader and display the information on the screen. All right. So this is kind of where we're going with it. So let's go ahead and go back to your console, to Visual Studio. And in here, go ahead and get rid of that line 15. We're going to start with a new line.
Whoops.
Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a connection. Okay. So the thing about connections is, go back to the diagram for a second. It's easier to explain in the diagram. The thing about a connection is that the connection, so if you consider your console application, the sandbox where .NET is running, mm-hmm. It has to go outside that sandbox, which means that it's an unmanaged resource. Creating a connection to a SQL database becomes something that the sandbox no longer controls. Remember, we talked about contracts, the whatever name of the program. Mm-hmm. And we said, those are contracts that specify what needs to get done, but it doesn't specify the details of how to do it. We go back to the example where I say, hey, paint my house and I'll give you $200, but how the $200 gets to you, we never discussed. It's just, we're just going to get you $200. So connection and the command, because they go outside the sandbox, they implement this interface called iDisposable. And so iDisposable is used within what they call syntactical sugar within C#, which takes care of the cleanup aspect. And so using that syntactical sugar, we don't have to worry about cleaning up any resources that go outside the sandbox. Because remember, once it goes outside the sandbox, we lose control of how we get rid of it. But because it uses iDisposable, using this syntactical sugar, it does very nice cleanup for us. We don't have to worry about it. So let's go back to Visual Studio. And that syntactical sugar is called a using statement. So if you just type in using and then tab or tab,
using.
So now we're going to type in SQL, SQL, is capital S, lowercase QL, connection, all one word. No, all one word, yeah, connection. And control period, because we need to bring in the namespace for it. And yeah, we want the SQL client. So go ahead and install that. Find the latest. It's going to go and install a NuGet package. And you see how I brought in the SQL statement up on top? And so go ahead and press and hit space. So that's the type, right? Now we got to give it a variable name. That variable name, let's just call it CONN, short for connection. And so this variable is going to equal to a new SQL connection. So we have to instantiate a new connection. So equals new, and it's going to automatically select SQL connection. So, so the thing about the SQL connection is that it doesn't know what it's connecting to. So you have to tell it what you're connecting to. And in order to do that, you have to provide a connection string. So inside those parentheses, you're going to double quote, you're going to use double quotes, and we're going to give it a string or a string of characters. So double quotes, go ahead and close your double quotes as well. And then inside the double quotes, source, SOURCE. And we're going to say inside of parentheses, local, because remember, that's the official way of indicating where that server. We're going to say initial catalog, 2 words, and it could be all lowercase if you want. It's initial is TIAL, initial, NI, catalog. And it's going to be equal to significant. So we're telling it when you connect to your local database, you're going to connect to significant. And there's no space between the equal. This is a weird connection string. I don't know why they did it this way. And then at the end of significant, it's semicolon again. And we're going to say username, 2 words, all lowercase. 2 words.
Oh,
yeah. Equals. And then you can go ahead and just say SA, which is the system administrator. And then semicolon. And then you're going to put the password. So password equals, and then the actual password. You remember the password? Is it something simple?
I think it's just password.
Was it that simple? All right. Is it password 1?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so let's test this. So inside of the using bracket,
The using
on line 18.
Okay.
We're going to say CONN dot open. We're going to open the connection. Open close parenthesis. And then semicolon. And then go ahead and press enter. And we'll do a write line. Console write line. And then in here, you're going to display the state of the connection. So it's going to be CONN dot state. Yep. Press tab. It has to be the capital S.
Oh. Whoa.
Whoa. All right, cool. And then after the console write line, you can do connection.close or CONN.close. New line. I think if you press tab, it automatically, there you go.
Oh.
And then semicolon. You got to finish it off with semicolon. Let's run this and see if it works. We just want to connect to the database. Let's see if it works.
Oh.
Oh, what did it say? Keyword not supported. Okay, so it's obviously not source. Let's go ahead and close this window. I believe it might be server. And if not, we'll go and search on Google.
So the
instead of source, it's server.
Try again.
Let's try it again.
Username.
Username. Okay. Let's just user. Get rid of name. Let's try that again. Oh, you're gonna have to stop it.
Oh.
You have to stop it and then run it again. A connection was successfully established with the server, but an error occurred during login process. Huh. Let's see. Let's look at the view details. And let's look at inner exception. Expand the inner exception. And you can expand this box too, so you can. And no process at the end of the pipe. Okay, so this tells me that your server is not accepting connections. So we have to enable that. So go ahead and close this. And go ahead and stop this. Yeah. Okay, cool. So go ahead and click on your little Windows, the little Windows icon at the bottom, and then type in SQL. And in here, we want to go and look at, you see where it says SQL Server 2019 Configuration Manager? Yeah, let's go ahead and open this. And then under, let's look at SQL Services. Let's click on that one. And okay, it's not that one. Look at the second one where it says network configuration. And bless you.
Thank you. There's no items to show.
Yeah, let's expand the expand SQL Server network configuration. And then protocols. Aha. So let's enable name pipes and TCP/IP. All right. And now you can go ahead. So this is the only reason I know is because I've been working since 1997. I've been working with SQL Server, and that's why I know. And so this is one that, you know, for the books, it's like you only ever run into this because when you install a new instance of SQL Server. This is the only time you're going to see this, you know, so this is kind of one of those little rare moments that you run into these errors and you're like, man, I got to take note of that. So if you're watching this video, take note of this right here, because you're not going to run into this problem very often. You're going to have to go search and hopefully you find it. So this is a very rare moment. Okay. So let's go ahead and close this window and let's go back to SSMS. And we need to restart SQL. I think it's the one on your right.
Okay.
So right click on your local SQL.
My local SQL.
Yeah, the very top one, and restart.
Refresh?
Restart.
Oh.
And yep, hit yes. And it's going to go through a cycle process. It's probably showing you a window where it's restarting it. It's stopping it and then restarting it.
Here we go.
So yeah, so you'll see this window and it's going to go and restart it. Okay, so now let's go back to Visual Studio. And let's run this again. Okay, a connection was successfully established, but there was an error occurred in the login process. Shared memory provider error. No process is at the other end of the pipe. Space. and it's going to automatically select SQL Connection. So,
Oh,
yep. And then open close parenthesis. Okay, so we established a connection. You learned a lot. You got to explore so much about SQL Server here. There was a significant amount of information here. Man, this section here should be broken out into a troubleshooting section.
yeah.
This was this was good. This was really good. We're gonna have to find a way to edit and just get that right piece in there.
Yeah, we can do that.
That way we don't get a 2-hour video troubleshooting. This troubleshooting took us like 30 minutes just to connect. All right. So now that we have a connection open, so here's the trick about SQL Server, okay? SQL Server connecting outside of the sandbox, when you're going outside of .NET, it's a very intensive process. So you want to open up your connections as late as possible and close them as early as possible. So essentially you're going to do all this setup, and right before you execute your code, you open up that connection, execute, and then once it's completed, you close that connection. And so those are very resource intensive connections that are happening. And every time you connect, you're taking up memory space and you're taking up processor power in order to keep these connections. So when you're connecting on a server, especially on like in a website, you can have several hundred people connected to the database server. And so you want to make sure that those connections are opened up as late as possible and closed as soon as you execute whatever commands you're executing, right? And once you grab your data, you close those connections right away. So it's really important. So we're gonna keep this connection open. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of 18, 19, and 20, but we're gonna remember to open them as late as possible. So we're gonna come back to it, okay? So go ahead and get rid of those lines for now. We already know that the connection works. And now what we need to do is we need to create a command object inside your connection object, okay? So in here, you're going to create, and the thing is that the command object is also an iDisposable, just like the connection is. So we need another using statement.
Okay. Using.
And then in here is going to be a SQL command. Yep, that one right there. So we're going to call this variable CMD. Well, you see how we created a connection up on top?
Yeah.
We need to do the same thing with the SQL command, but we're just going to call it CMD. So when you open up the parenthesis on this one, this takes a parameter, and the parameter is the SQL connection. So we're going to type in CONN. Your SQL connection happens to be the second parameter. You need a first parameter. You see the little arrow where it says 1 of 4? And you'll see that the second command or the second parameter is a connection.
Yeah.
So the first one, we're going to put in the name of the store procedure that selects everything. You remember the name of that? Maximize this window. Yeah. So let's go to the significant database. And we're going to go down to programmability. And then store procedures. And it's going to be birth date select all.
Okay. I can't copy it, huh?
Yeah, go ahead and click one more time in there. No, inside that birthdays. Yeah, just click on birthdays, select all. Okay, and then now copy it. And then just click outside. Yeah. So this is the name of the store procedure. So then outside your double quotes, you're going to hit comma. And you're going to give it the connection variable, which is CONN. So now we've created the connection, and with the connection, we created a command object. So let's go back to that diagram to see where we're at. Your console application, right? That's your list all method. We've created a connection, and then we've created our command.
Cool.
All right. So now we have to go tell the command, hey, go get me some tabular data. Okay. So let's go back to Visual Studio.
There we go.
Look at that.
They're all there.
They're all there. Let's just display the ID and the full name. And what we could do is on line 38, just type in ID : colon, yeah, and then space. And then instead of a comma after ID, just put a space. Yeah, get rid of the comma.
Oh.
And just put a space. And then get rid of the rest of them. Get rid of all the variables.
Oh.
Except full name. No, not full name. From date of birth all the way to the end. There you go. Okay, let's run that. Let's see how that looks. I think that's going to look better. So remember, you got to do something that's appealing to the eye, right? And I'm thinking we could probably just get rid of ID. That looks kind of crappy now that I'm looking at it. Okay, and then let's run that. All right, cool. So this actually doesn't look bad, okay? And so I think what I want to do is when we start the application, right, it starts with the main method. And then that main method calls, what is it calling? List birthdays? Yeah, list birthdays. And then it comes back to the main method, right? So at that point, we can actually create something to do some kind of command, all right? So after line 12, let's go ahead and do another console write line. And inside of double quotes, let's say select action.
One word, 2 words?
2 words. We're actually talking to the user.
Oh.
And then go ahead and start a new line again, and we'll do another console write line. And inside of double quotes, we'll say D, and then do a space dash, like the minus sign. Yeah. And put display record information. And then on the next console write line, we'll say inside of double quotes, we'll have a U with a space dash space, update record information. And then the next one will be create. So C, now that I'm thinking about it, we could probably just do like an actual CRUD. Why do you have a 0 at the end?
Oh.
Oh, I thought you were actually going to do something.
No.
And then the third or the last one is going to be, let's change, go ahead and type in delete record, D space dash D, and we'll do delete record. And then we'll change the display record to R. Yeah, and then change the display record, change that to an R. And then put the rows in order so that we get CRUD.
Okay.
So just move the third one to the first one.
Oh.
Crud. Sweet. Let's run that, see what it looks like. Nice. So let's put a little bit of spacing. Let's put a space before the select action. So just do an empty. Yeah, go ahead and just do an empty console write line. Yep, run it. Okay, this is cool. I like this. If they press R, then we take them to the read method. All right, so the way that we're going to be able to do this, go ahead and go back to the program. And after line 18, we're going to have to do, let me see, how do we do this? Oh, you know what? We need another console write, X to exit. All right. We'll call this, we'll say var action is equal to, inside the while, we're going to do a switch statement. Inside the while, inside the brackets.
Oh.
Do a switch statement. And you're going to, type in switch. And you're going to switch on action. So action, you see where it says switch on?
Oh.
You're going to replace that with action. Yep. Okay, so now we're going to start our case, right? Case inside the switch, inside the we'll go ahead and just do we'll do an R or do the C. Go ahead and do the C inside of the inside double quotes. And it's going to be yeah, go ahead and do a semicolon, not the semicolon, the colon, and then press enter. And go ahead and do a console write line. And then just type in you press C. Inside double quote, sorry. Of course, we're displaying this to the user. All right, and then close your double quotes, and then break after that. Yeah, this is indented, so just press enter, and just break, and then semicolon, and then press enter again and type in case, and it'll fix it for you when you type in the colon. So case R. And then colon. Okay. See how it fixes the indentation for you?
Yeah.
So press enter and then CW and then you pressed R. And we'll do that for each one of those.
Okay.
Except the X, because the X should exit out. And remember, you need a break after each one of those.
Okay.
So read is giving us an integer. That's not what we want. How about if we use read key? What is that giving us? That gives us a string. So I think that's going to be the good one for now. Mm-hmm. So read gives us a key info. Read key gives us, remember, every character is associated with a number. Mm-hmm. And so that that's what we would have had to read. We would have had to read the number itself, right? So read line, you have to press enter, but I think it'll work out for now. That's fine. So let's go ahead and run this, and I want to see how this behaves. So read is giving us an integer. That's not what we want. How about if we use read key? What is that giving us? That's giving us a key info. How about read line? What does that give us? That gives us a string. So I think that's going to be the good one for now.
Mm-hmm.
So read gives us a key info. Read key gives us, remember, every character is associated with a number.
Mm-hmm.
And so that that's what we would have had to read. We would have had to read the number itself, right? So read line, you have to press enter, but I think it'll work out for now. That's fine. So let's go ahead and run this, and I want to see how this behaves. So it's select an action. So let's press C and then press enter.
Whoa.
Whoa. Control C to kill that. So while, oh, you know what? We need to have line 20 inside the while.
Okay.
So go ahead and put it right at top. And this here, we're going to have to add a new case. And let's just go ahead and do a default after D. Oh, wait a second. We need to initialize that variable outside of the while, but we need to assign it inside the while. So yeah, so at line 20, yeah, initialize that variable. It'll just be var action equals, and then just give it empty quotes, empty double quotes. Okay. And then get rid of the var on line 24 because a var is initializing that variable. We don't need to initialize it anymore. Okay. And get rid of line 21. All right, let's run this, see what we get. All right, press C. Press R. Press U. Press D and X. Close this. And I think that or is an and. So it's double ampersand. Ampersand is a shift 7. Yeah. Let's try that, see if that works. So let's try C and try X. There it is. So it exited out. Nice. Okay, cool. So now we got a way to go and grab a particular record, right? So nice. All right. And so at the end of this, yeah, you can get rid of that last line. So at the end of this, it just goes back into the loop, right? Because everything came from that loop. So go back up to the top of your code here, all the way to the top. So right here, right? So we're inside this loop. If you press R, it's going to go and display the record. It's going to break and it's going to go back into the loop and wait for the next command, right? So what I think we should do, we'll play around with it. Let's try it. Let's run it. See what we get.
Let's do it.
So let's press R and display record number 2 or 3. Oh,
no.
What is it saying here?
Exception release.
Oh, we forgot the parameter. We got to give it the ID. We got to give the store procedure the ID, remember? So how do we do that? Go ahead and stop this. You could just hit the red button up on top in Visual Studio. So when we're passing in parameters, After line 53, start a new line. And we have to say command cmd dot parameters dot add with value, open parenthesis. And so inside of double quotes, we got to give the name of our parameter. And it has to be identical. So if you go back to your store procedure.
Over here.
Yep. And then right click on select by ID and modify. You see the name of your parameter on line 9?
Yeah.
That name at ID, it has to be identical inside of those double quotes.
Okay.
At ID. Okay, and then outside your quote, inside your parenthesis is comma, and then the value of what that record should be.
Int.
So it's going to be the record ID, right?
Oh, record ID?
Is it record ID?
Object value.
So you gotta put that whole, you see that console write line? What's inside those parentheses? Car record ID?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta pass in that whole, you actually have to, have to convert that string to an integer. So yeah, this one's going to be ugly. We're going to have to figure out a way to make this prettier. But for now, let's go ahead and grab that car record ID or that char record ID. Go ahead and grab that. And let's see if that works. Go ahead and try that. So press R, enter, and then press 3.
Hey.
Oh, it worked. That thing's freaking wickedly fast too, huh?
Yeah.
It just like goes right through. That's pretty cool. What we'll do is we'll put this as part 1, and then we'll do a part 2. But I want to get through this week because I want to be able to do all this stuff, and then I want to refactor. I think there's value for you to type in the repeated code because I feel like you're lacking some of the practice. And so just, building that muscle memory is going to be important. And so that's why I'm letting you go through that painful time.
Yeah.
But we'll refactor this and we'll make it a little bit easier. And then through that refactoring, you'll see how you can start building custom objects and things like that. Because that refactoring is going to take us right into the web APIs when you're ready. And so that's going to be something that I want to start using as well.
Okay.
Pretty cool so far?
Yeah, it's fun.
All right. So so we're going to do part 2 and part 2 is going to be the delete, and then part 3 is going to be the update, and then part 4 we're going to do a little bit of refactoring, and we're going to clean up the code so that we don't have to be repeating the same thing over and over. And
okay.
we'll see how we do that. But this is kind of cool, huh?
Yeah.
Grabbing the data from the database.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
See you later.
The end of
episode 10.
Episode 10 is going to be broken up into 4 parts.
Episode 10, part 1.
Part 1, that's right. See you on the next one.